today I've got another great conversation. I had Sarah Huckabee on not too long ago, good friend, former colleague, and the next governor of Arkansas. But today I've got another Huckabee, her father, who's also a great friend. He's been a real huge supporter and friend of mine um, for a long time. He was always really supportive during my time at the RNC and then through the White House. And then afterwards, he's got a fantastic show. It airs on TBN every Saturday night. If you don't watch it, I highly encourage you to. Just always great guests, great conversation. Um, it re-airs on Newsmax on Sundays. And then he's obviously was governor. He was a pastor before that. He's written several books. Let him tell you how many because it's amazing. He plays guitar in a band. He endorses a lot of products and been very successful politically. Ran for president. And I just have always been very fascinated by his trajectory. And that's kind of the nut of this. And it's like, here's a guy, and it's funny because you think you know somebody, and during this conversation, you're going to find out, and I found out some things that I didn't really know about in terms of how his career trajectory went. And he's just a really good person. And that's the thing. In politics, you find a lot of fair weather friends. You find a lot of people who are there for you in the moment. Mike Huckabee is someone who is there through thick and thin, through good and bad. He's funny. He's smart. He's insightful. He gets the business part of everything. He just gets the mentorship part of everything. I enjoy watching him. And as I told him in this interview, when I was starting at Newsmax, one of the media trainers had to come in because obviously I hadn't done TV before. And so Newsmax got me these people that would talk to me about how to come in and out of things and how to engage with the audience, et cetera. And they said, give us a sense of who you think does a good job as a host, who does a good job as an interviewer. And one of the people I said, Mike Huckabee. I love watching his show. I love how he interacts with guests. And I brought this up with him because he does such a good job when he's interviewing a guest about getting something out of them. And that's the key. And it's when you're doing the job that I do, and it's different because he has a more long form show and I've got to get through topics. He's getting through guests. It's a little different. But what I love about how he conducts himself and how he conducts his show is that when I walk away, I've learned something about the guest. And sometimes it's a guest that I've never heard of. And I'm like, why does he have that person on? And by the end of it, I'm like, wow, what an interesting person. And he brings that out. And there's a real trick to this. And it's not just a trick. You hear it in his voice when he talks. He knows how to engage and tell a story and bring things to life in a very, very different way than a lot of people do. And so I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation with you. And without further ado, Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor Mike Huckabee, thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Great to be able to pick your brain a little.
Well, if it's picking my brain, Sean, it's not going to take long. We should be finished in about 30 seconds. So delighted
I'll
to be
string
with
it
you.
out.
You're one of my favorite people, and I really appreciate you. I've said to many people that Sean Spicer is one of the nicest guys that I've ever known in politics. He's smart. And I love the fact, I don't think enough people know you were a naval officer, and I appreciate your service to the country in many respects. It's just a true pleasure to be able to have a visit with you.
Oh, well, the Mutual Admiration Society continues. We'll get to that a little bit later. Thank you for your kind comments. But I'll tell you, I had a conversation with some folks the other day about book tours and shows that I've done. And we'll touch on this in a minute, but you just, the show that you have and the experiences, obviously, and you've been extremely kind and generous to me, but it's such a pleasant show. And again, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So I think it goes both ways. And obviously I think the world of your daughter. She joined us a little while ago. We'll get to that as well. But I want to just start at the beginning. I'm always fascinated. The podcast is really about how people got where they are now and sort of beyond the success that they've had. And I think you've had that in several areas, but walk us back to where you started in terms of your family. And you obviously went on to start a career in
the religious service as a pastor, and then went beyond that. But how was the formation of the family important or not at that point in growing up to send you off in the direction that you were?
Well, it's very important and a very critical part of who I am and the way I'm wired. Um, I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser in that what really started me on the path that I'm on all happened because of a broken finger at the age of 11 when I was playing Little League Baseball in my hometown of Hope, Arkansas. But I'll get to that in just a moment. I just wanted to kind of alert you that that was the seminal moment in my life that everything changed and the trajectory went a completely different way. But I grew up, some people say they grew up in a working class family. I grew up in uh, a very poor working class family. We lived in a little orange shotgun brick house on 2nd Street in Hope, Arkansas. My parents rented the house. We didn't own it. And, it was tough. My father worked 2 jobs. He was a fireman and then he was a mechanic. And with 2 jobs, he barely could put the rent together to take care of us. But he did. And we never missed a payment on anything. He always believed in paying your bills on time, never, ever owing people anything that, he didn't cover. So I was raised in a very strict ethical family. But, I also came up where education had never been a part of our family. My father never finished high school. His father didn't. His father didn't. His father before him didn't. There's not a single male upstream from me that ever had finished high school, much less gone to college. So for me, getting even to the point where I was going to finish high school, I'd be breaking the sound barrier. The
Right.
thought of going to college, you got to be kidding. But as a kid, because we didn't have anything, I learned how to work because I didn't have a choice. If I wanted BBs for my BB gun, if I wanted a baseball or a baseball glove, it wasn't like Pop opens the wallet and shells out some coin and says, hey, go get whatever you need. Didn't work like that. Here's how it worked. Oh, okay. Well, let's see what jobs you can pick up and maybe you can earn enough to get what you need. And it wasn't that my parents were mean, and it wasn't that they didn't care, didn't love me, weren't generous. They made great sacrifices for my sister and for me, but they couldn't do what they couldn't do. So as a little kid, I used to pick up what jobs I could. And when I was 8, 9 years old, the only jobs kids my age could get was catching chickens. And we go to chicken houses at 10 o'clock at night. We were virtually slave labor, to be perfectly blunt. And it's a good thing that government agencies like OSHA really weren't monitoring any of this because somebody would have gotten arrested. But, we'd go into chicken houses, we'd work all night long catching chickens, which is the most hideous job on God's green earth, running around there with these stupid chickens. And I don't have to tell you how bad it smells and how nasty it is. Grabbing chickens by the legs and stuffing them in these wooden crates so they could go off and one day be part of Colonel Sanders' offerings. So, I'd come out of those chicken houses like at 6 a.m. And we were so nasty that our mothers wouldn't let us in the house. We'd stand outside, we'd get hosed off down to our underwear. Then we'd go in and take like 3 showers in a row. And I would always say, what do I have to do so I don't have to do this for the rest of my life? And I'd always get the same answer. Got to work hard, get a good education, and treat people right. So from the time I'm a young kid, I'm thinking, I don't know what else I'm going to do with my life, but by gosh, I'm going to work hard, get a good education, and I'm going to treat people right because I do not want to catch chickens and also haul hay in August in Arkansas. I don't want to do that stuff for the rest of my life. So that's sort of the beginning. I'm blessed that I grew up like that. And I say that I'm not a victim. Good heavens, no. I learned how to work. I learned that nobody owes me anything. I live in a country that affords me the opportunity to work hard. And if I do it, I might be able to get beyond where I started, which is what I celebrate about this great country. When I was 11 years old, I was doing what every kid in my hometown did, and that's played Little League Baseball because there was nothing else to do. I'm behind home plate. I'm the catcher for what arguably is the worst team in the league. And a kid hits a foul tip, And I did what a catcher's never supposed to do. I held my mitt, and then I put my hand out to the side of the mitt to make sure I caught that foul tip. I misjudged the ball. It hit the top of my index finger on my right hand and just totally bent it back toward my elbow, the opposite direction. I mean, obviously it shattered it. I remember holding it up and looking over at my coach. I mean, this looked awful. Everybody in the stands is about to puke, and I just held it up. I'm in shock at this point. And I said, "Hey, coach, I think I broke my finger." It's like, gee, with insights like that, I could be an orthopedic surgeon someday. But it obviously ended my season, and it ultimately ended my Little League career. But because I couldn't finish the season, the coach said, "Look, why don't you go up in the press box of the Little League park?" And it's got to understand, a tiny Little League park in Hope, Arkansas. And they'll let you do the PA announcing. You can tell who the batter is and who's coming up. And I thought, okay, I can do that. So I go up there. I get free popcorn and Coke. So it's a pretty cool deal.
Oh.
Now, my hometown is so small that the local radio station broadcasts all the Little League games.
No,
you got to live in a small town. And, you know, I look back and I'm thinking, who actually listened to 11, 12-year-old boys playing baseball on the radio? But I guess people did. Totally advertiser supported. So I'm there one night. The guy that normally does the broadcast was sick. The station manager comes out. He obviously didn't want to sit there for 3 hours and doing balls and strikes and play-by-play of Little League games. Half jokingly, he turns to me and he says, "Hey, kid, how would you like to call a couple of innings of a baseball game?" And I said, "Sure." He slid the mic down there to me, and I did my first radio broadcast at the age of 11. He said to me, "Hey, kid, you're not that bad." Now, Sean, he didn't say, "Kid, you're good," but because being good was not a qualification to be on that radio station. He just said, "You're not that bad." He said, "When you get 14 and can, you know, actually get to work and get a social security number or get takeout pay," he said, "come see me, I'll give you a job." And within 2 days of my 14th birthday, I obtained my FCC broadcast license. And I went to work at KXAR Radio in Hope, Arkansas. And I was a disc jockey, sportscaster, did news. And all through junior high, high school, college, and grad school, I did radio and later television. And that's what paid my way through college. I would never have been able to go to school. But when I got to college, I worked 40 hours a week at a local radio station in my college town. Having all those years of doing it before gave me an incredible opportunity to go in and say, "Look, I got 6 years experience and I'm 18 years old, basically."
Right.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah,
isn't it?
you know what? I not only that, but it's always to me fascinating, whether it's in politics or anywhere else in life. And I've got, you know, similar experiences with meeting people where it's like, if this hadn't happened, I would have never walked out and met so-and-so. Right. And those are those pivotal moments in life that it's amazing that you remember it. So that one moment where if that finger hadn't gotten, you know, if you hadn't messed up by putting your hand in the glove. But so, all right, then walk me through, because I think most people they've seen the commercials, the books, they've voted for you, they've watched the show, but how do you know, again, I think many people might forget you started as a pastor. So how does that come into play? And then from there, how do you say, God, I want to serve God and I want to, you know, help people find you know, grace and all of the things that come with leading sort of a flock to get into politics? Because I think those are the things that are intriguing as far as like, you know, you look at where you are now, and then if you back up and go, how do you become the pastor?
Yeah.
How do you get into religious life? But then how do you go from religious life and say, hey, let me go hang out with a bunch of not always the most holiest of people?
Well, that's being charitable to say to people.
Oh, well, you know, I was gonna,
but it's true.
Right.
Well, I think a lot of it for me, the pastor was not my first career. It was really radio, television, and advertising. I ran an ad agency. I ghost wrote books for people. I worked in television, and I was doing all those things. And I created my own ad agency and was, you know, humming along. And I really thought, okay, I'm going to do this for a few years. Then I'm going to run for Congress and I'm going to get in politics. And the pastorate became the detour that I did not expect. everyone thinks that was my first career. It was actually my second, because I thought I would maybe end up in religious broadcasting, but not the pastorate. And so from this world of radio, television, and advertising, a church in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, the short version is they asked me to come and be their pastor. They were without one. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm going to do that, but they said, just be an interim until we find somebody. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, but were you a religious? I mean, did they just say, "Hey, we heard you at a little league game"? Like, what was the?
No, I mean, I was
leading
clearly
Bible studies.
Yeah, I was
like,
a believer, and I
Yeah.
spoke at a banquet because I did a lot of external speaking and stuff like that, and I spoke at a banquet for this church. And the people there told the church without a pastor, "Hey, you ought to ask this guy to come and speak in your church." So that's how it kind of happened. And when I did, they said, "Hi, we like you. You ought to stay." And I thought, well, I can't stay permanently, but I'll hang around for a few months till you find somebody. After a few months, they come back and they say, "We found somebody." I said, "Terrific. Tell me what's my last day." They said, "Well, it's not quite that simple. You are the somebody." And I said, "No, I'm not. I don't want to be a pastor." And they said, No, you're the guy." And it was just such a bizarre deal. And, as I prayed about it and realized maybe this is kind of like the broken finger. It's not what I was expecting, but maybe this is in fact what I'm supposed to do. So that's how I ended up in it. And for the next 12 years, I engaged in what for me became a very intense graduate school kind of study of humanity. And what I learned through that experience, among having the incredible privilege of serving people in that role and walking them through the toughest moments of life, I got to see life in a way no one else does. Because people tended to see later when I got into politics, says, "Hey, what do you know? You've been a pastor." And I'm thinking, well, let me tell you what I know. There isn't a social pathology that we face in our world that I don't know a name and a face to put to it. Doesn't matter whether it's hunger, old people who are becoming addled with dementia, middle-aged couples who are becoming the parents to their parents, the young couple who has the death of their 2-year-old, the 14-year-old girl who's pregnant and tells her pastor before she even tells her parents and is struggling with what to do. I mean, just name it. Every social pathology, the pastor is the one who is dealing with these folks, and he can actually put a name and a face to every single issue we face. So what I really spent those years doing was learning and getting an understanding of human nature and the human struggle like the which I never would have learned had I gotten it from a textbook. So when I did get into politics, I think I had a totally different perspective than most people running for office, because when people talked about what it's like for a child to go home hungry from school, I knew who those kids were. I knew where they lived. I'd been in their homes. I'd taken sacks of food to them and opened the cupboards and saw that it was empty. I knew couples who were in their 80s who had to cut their medicine in half because they couldn't afford that and food at the same time. So they had to make a choice. Those were people that I actually knew. I'd been in their homes. I'd stood at the bedside of people when they were drifting into eternity and with their families standing around hoping they'll make it, but they don't. So did it make me a different kind of person in politics? Boy, it sure did. And even to this day, I feel like that there's a different level of understanding that I brought to the task that I wouldn't have had it not been for that experience.
So you at some point decide you and are running in 1992 for the Senate. I mean, that's a big leap. I know today people may not think that, because a lot of political neophytes sort of, in this cycle, you've got Blake Masters and JD Vance and Dr. Oz, all these people who've never, Herschel Walker, who've never run before. But back then, I mean, people just didn't run for the Senate. And that year, I think was Clinton was in cycle, right? Your fellow Hope, Arkansas. So what, and the question I have is, so you run for the Senate. I think anyone who knows your bio knows you didn't win, but is that another broken finger moment? Does that teach you something and set you up? Because then obviously we can get to this. You go from that to you become lieutenant governor. So
right.
It's and I always feel like, I think for a lot of folks, it's the setbacks that make you stronger and better. And so I sort of walk me through from pastor to politics.
Well, I became the president of our Southern Baptist denomination in the state. And that was one of the reasons that I had a little better platform to run for Senate with than, let's say, if I'd just been a pastor. So because of that position, largest denomination in the state, I was much better known than probably any pastor in the state at that point. And as president of the denomination, I had contacts with people in all 75 counties. And, I really wondered whether people would accept me running for anything, certainly Senate. But you're right, it's not typical that you would just jump into a high-level statewide position like that and give it a shot. As it turned out, it wasn't the best year to do that as a Republican in Arkansas, but be honest,
Right.
there had never been a good time to be a Republican in Arkansas because there had only been 3 elected in 150 years in the state. It was that hardcore yellow dog Democrat. So it was pretty crazy on my part to say, yeah, I'm going to go run for statewide office against a 3-term incumbent U.S. senator. But I did. And I would affirm what you said a moment ago. The setbacks in our lives, they're often far better than the step forwards. And losing the Senate race was yet another broken finger moment for me. It's almost going to sound like that I've broken every finger on both hands, but it's get my life story.
More to go.
But I'm glad I didn't win. And one of the main reasons I'm glad is because I would have hated the Senate. I realize now that my wiring is more to be executive branch, not legislative. I didn't understand fully at the time how that all panned out, but I do now. And especially having served as governor for nearly 11 years, I realize I love the executive branch. I was good at it. I would have been miserable in the legislative branch because the two branches, to oversimplify it, it's this: legislative branch is deliberative and it's slow and it's intended to be that way. And it's all about getting all these different points of view and letting everyone come into the kitchen with their own spoon and spices. And gosh, I hate that. The executive branch is not deliberation, it's decision. It's not the process, it's the product. And that's what really winds my motor. So I found myself totally in the groove in the executive branch and loved every minute of it. And if I'd been elected to the Senate, most people, when they get there, they never leave. They say there's only 2 ways to leave: the ballot box or the pine box, because most people will never leave on their own.
Yeah.
And so I would have probably, gone, and I'm sure I'd have been a, okay senator, but I don't think I would have enjoyed it and had been as fulfilled as I was. So when I lost the Senate race, the chairman of the state party said, look, Bill Clinton's just been elected president. The lieutenant governor has become governor. There's going to be a special election for lieutenant governor. Why don't you run? And first response was, because I don't want to be the lieutenant governor is why. And he said, but we don't have anybody else who has run a statewide race, no one who has an organization. And basically he was saying to me, there's no shot you have to win, but would you just take one for the team? We got to put somebody out there. And, you're as warm a body as we got. So go do it. By the way, his name was Asa Hutchinson, who is now the governor. He was party chairman. And so I thought, well, maybe I owe it to all these good and wonderful people who helped me even through this process. I ran. Dick Morris, a name you're familiar with, was my political consultant in that race. And something happened that no one thought could. I won. And I beat Bill Clinton's hand-picked candidate, the guy who is his former chief legal counsel in the governor's office. And I did it on a dime to his dollar. And it absolutely sent shockwaves in the Arkansas political kingdom. And I became only the 4th Republican to be elected to a state office in 150 years. And the rest is, as they say, history.
Well, so you then go on to become the longest serving governor of Arkansas. You then launched for president. I just want to ask you, what did you learn about politics and yourself when you ran for president?
I think running for president, one thing you learn is that a lot of people will tell you that they're going to be with you. And what that does mean in reality, the old saying is when people say they're behind you, they're right. They are way behind you. And I found that so many people were very fickle and they were with me as long as they thought I had a shot at winning and they were going to get something from it. When things started moving the wrong way, they disappear. I also found, though, that there are some magnificent, great American people out there that want nothing from the guy who runs for office. They're not looking to be appointed. They're not looking to sleep in the Lincoln bedroom. They have no illusions of that. They love their country and they want someone they believe in. And they made me feel so grateful to have run for president because I realized that there's a lot more fantastic people in this country as there are the ones who are self-serving and self-dealing. But it's a wake-up call. And I learned how vicious, unfair, and unethical the press can be. I know you wouldn't have any knowledge of something like that, Sean.
That's why I find these insights very, very valuable because I'm learning a lot about these people you call the press.
I'm sure you're shocked to find out just how terrible they can be, but they are.
My experience. Yes.
But it was a great learning experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And people say, "Do you regret running?" I said, "Absolutely not." And then I have the stupidest thing people say to me is when they say, "Well, you didn't really expect you could win, did you?" And I just want to punch them right in the face and say, let me ask you something. Do you honestly think that a person would mortgage his home, go without income for 18 months, work his rear end off all over the country, get 3 hours of sleep a night for more than a year, just so I could lose? Just how stupid are you? I mean, of course I thought I could win. You don't run for public office. I hear people all the time say, well, he didn't really run to win. He just ran because he thought he'd get some name ID. There are better ways to get your name identified than running for office because sometimes it can blow up on you. And I just find people who say that don't have a clue what running for office is all about.
Yeah. I look, I haven't been on the worker bee side of this. I can't agree with you more. I mean, no one runs that doesn't think they're going to win or can win. And I've told people that all the time who say like, oh, you guys honestly didn't think you're going to win. When you've put in the blood, sweat, and tears, whether it's as the candidate or the staff, like you don't say, hey, I'm giving up my weekends, I'm doing all this because I don't think I can win. It's just not how you rationalize the winning. Yeah. I mean, I just, because even every race that I've done, people will be like, you couldn't have possibly thought that. And I'm like, I've been on enough that came out of nowhere to win that you always think that we can be that one.
Well, yeah, you just want to say nobody ever works as hard just to prove what it's like to lose. I mean, you just don't. You can lose a lot easier than this.
Right.
You don't have to work this hard to lose.
So I got two more things I want to touch base on you because I know so you've written depending, over 10 books, depending on the source, it's 11 or 12, but I think you stopped counting at 10.
14 is the actual number, by the way.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think they just give up when you start. Okay. 14. You've written 14 books. You've done some pretty big endorsement deals. You're on doing the Relaxium, which I'm actually a fan of. I think it's a great product, and I know you and your wife both do it. And then, but you've got the Super PAC, the television show that is on TBN and re-airs on Newsmax. What have you enjoyed the most?
I love being governor. That's probably going to be the best job I will have ever had because it's something you can actually see get done every day you go to work. Some things requires legislation, but it's also a job where you can really affect people's lives by the things that you propose. The second closest to that would be doing what I'm doing now with the television show at TBN. It's the show I always wanted to do because it's not just wall-to-wall politics that raise everyone's blood pressure to 400 over 300. It's an old-fashioned variety show with enough politics to keep it interesting and current. But it also has a whole lot of entertainment with music and comedy and even magicians and acrobats. And it's done with a live studio audience. And you've been in our theater, and there's an electricity there. It's just fun. It's a fun show.
I tell you, if you haven't tuned into the show, it's on Saturday nights. And again, we play it on Newsmax. So I have to, I'll definitely put the plug in there, but it really is. It's sort of like how people would do a late night show that you could watch with your family. You got the band, and the Keith, the announcer, and it's just, I think, like to your point, there's musicians and magicians. There's, always some kind of talent thing. And so it's funny. I literally, on Sunday mornings, if I haven't watched the show, I watch just because you always got great guests, and I'm always literally admittedly trying to steal them. I'm like, who because you got singer. I mean, you had Kathy Lee Gifford not up too long ago. You and I are both friends with David Limbaugh. He's been on the show. It's like, but it was an amazing interview. And I think the thing that's interesting, and this is, I want to touch on this before I get to the last question, but it's, when I watch the show, I think of back to when I started. And when I started here, I didn't have a media background. So they hired some media trainers for me that kind of came in and talked, how does the show flow? How do you get viewers to stay engaged and pick good topics, whatever. And this one woman said to me, pick 3 people that you think are good hosts or good interviewers. And so, and I picked you, and I said, I love going on your show, and I love watching the interviews because of how you ask the questions and how you bring out things in guests. Anybody can ask a question, but what I like is when you learn something about the guest and you elicit a conversation that you didn't maybe think you were going to have. And so I enjoy that. And the question I have for you though is, who do you sometimes not model, but maybe look at and say, wow, they're really good at that, or there's somebody that, I know you obviously go way back into those early days of your broadcast career, but is there anybody that you look at and say they do a good job of asking questions or bringing out the best in guests?
Oh, wow. What a great question. A couple of people that I felt like always did interviews very well, one from the world of news and one from entertainment. And they both, to me, were great. Not that they sat down with me and mentored me, but I learned from watching them. One was Johnny Carson, because Johnny Carson, he had a good time. And of course, his was a really entertainment show, but the political humor that he did was never mean. He was always even-handed. He would, make fun of Republicans and Democrats alike. But the thing about Johnny Carson that made him so good is that you could tell that he had prepared very carefully, and he would ask his guests something that would cause them to unload things they probably really hadn't planned on unloading when they got there. So I try to make sure that I do some research, and I want to find little pieces of obscurity in their life, something that may show up somewhere that, frankly, I find fascinating and interesting. And if I can ask them, sometimes it's something that they really care about. It may be that it's an actor, but deep down, he always wanted to be a musician. And you find out that when he was 13, he played in a rock band and he loved it. And if you can just take him to that moment, you see his face light up. And suddenly he's 13 again, and he's talking about what really just gave him such a joy. So that was one of them. The other one, Larry King. Larry King, who interviewed me many times in the course of my run for president. I just adored him for this reason. He listened to his guest. He let his guest talk. He didn't ask, he didn't give me a 3-minute soliloquy and say, now give me 30 seconds of what you want to say to what I just said. I mean, he let his guests talk, but he also listened to the answer, and his follow-ups were related to that. Sean, you and I have both been in situations where we've been interviewed, and the interviewer asks us a question, and we open up and we say something, and it obviously leads to a follow-up and a perfect segue. And the questioner, as if he's turning his card over, says, okay, next question. And it's like he ignored what you just said. He missed the opportunity to grasp it. And you're thinking, you didn't hear a thing I just said, dude. You just went to your next card. And Larry King was so good at listening. And basically, Larry King came to the interview and he had one question ready, and everything else was based on what he heard from the guests. I thought that was just fascinating.
Yeah, it's good. It's one of the things that we try at the show on Spicer Company to do, because to your point, like, they're not here, they're coming to hear our guests. And I think allowing that guest to talk is so important. I think you're absolutely right. The last thing I do want to just touch on with you, because I'd be remiss if I didn't, is, I know your daughter, Sarah, she's a friend and a colleague, worked on your campaigns. So she's staffed you, she's whatever. What does it feel like to watch her? I mean, like, let's call a spade a spade. She's going to be the next governor of Arkansas. Is it, I mean, I guess like every dad is going to be proud of their daughter, right? And no matter what, if she was at Chick-fil-A, you'd be proud of her. That's just the kind of guy you are. But knowing that, she started in this world of politics, and she had done very, very well for herself. And then obviously gone on to be White House press secretary and did very well at that. But the idea that she is going to be the governor of Arkansas, it's just, I think that's, in my mind, at least, just a different realm, right? Because it's like, okay, you're now both going to be Governor Huckabee.
It's really something that I just stand back and sometimes pinch myself and think, wow, how cool is this? To my knowledge, it's the only time in American history where a father and daughter have been governor of the same state. There'd been a father-son combination in California with the Browns and in New York with the Cuomos. There was a father-son, but not the same state, the Romneys. And there was a father-daughter, but not the same state, Kathleen Sebelius and her father, who was governor of, I don't know, Illinois or somewhere, I can't remember. But never father-daughter, same state. And this is unique because Sarah basically grew up at the governor's mansion in Arkansas as a kid. And now she will go back and take her own children there, and they will grow up there, and she will be the governor. And it's just kind of exciting. But I also have this real sense of understanding what she's walking into. And so I hope she will embrace it as much as I did, enjoy it as much as I did, find it as fulfilling as I did. And I think she will, because unlike most people who get elected governor who think they know what they're getting into, not that living in the house of a governor is everything, but she does have an insight and an understanding that most people never will, because she was sitting around the dinner table. She did go with me to events. She did know what it's like to sit in my office at the Capitol and watch the decisions that were made. I think she's going to be a terrific governor. And can I just say thank you for how nice you were to her at the days of the White House. To this day, she adores you. You're still one of her favorite people. You were beyond kind to her, and you didn't have to be. It wasn't like you brought her there. I think, Trump probably said, okay, you got to hire her, find a spot. But, you just treated her with respect, and she considers you just a valued friend.
Well, she earned it and deserves it. I mean, and that's the thing, is that she's a good friend. And so you raised her well, and she's going to do a great job as governor. And then I will figure out some way of figuring out how this benefits me, because that's, I was like, wait a second, could she run for governor of Virginia, for goodness sakes?
I don't know.
All right, Governor, look, I will figure out something, because I was like, I may have to move there. I don't know. I need people in high place, although I'm doing pretty well with Governor Youngkin in Virginia. You've been very kind with your time. We end with a quick lightning round. You have a witty sense, so I don't think this will be a problem. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. When you travel, do you arrive early or just in time?
Always early.
How low can you let your cell phone battery go?
Never below about 40% ever.
That's good, man. How many unread emails do you currently have?
None. I keep up with them.
That's another New Year's resolution. If you had 40 hours to binge any show, what do you think it would be?
Godfather.
How clean do you keep your house?
Pretty clean generally. Yeah.
Okay. What's your least favorite chore?
Oh gosh, probably unloading the dishwasher.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a laundry guy. If you could have a drink with anyone alcoholic, non-alcoholic, with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, it'd be all four Beatles. That's who it would be. Yeah. I wouldn't drink alcohol. I don't, but they could, and I would get them good and drunk so I could really ask them the questions I've always wanted to know.
Yeah, I'd get Yoko there too, by the way. Who's the coolest celebrity that you've ever met?
Oh my gosh, I've met so many incredible celebrities.
I imagine it's got to be a musician. I would guess that, but
yeah, because those political figures, no big deal to me. It's like, yeah, okay, so what? But musicians and people who have done great things, it might be either in the country world, George Jones, the king of country.
Yeah.
In the rock and roll world, it's probably, I got to play with Leonard Skinner on stage on my television show and play Sweet Home Alabama with them.
That's
awesome.
I mean,
does it get any cooler than that?
No, I was going to say, yeah.
I don't guess it does.
Biggest pet peeve?
Phone calls. I hate phone calls.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd rather do 100 emails than one phone call.
Okay. What's something? That's a hint.
No,
What's something you? No. I just I will now remember that. Just email. Okay. What's something you won't go cheap on?
Ooh, good steaks.
Oh, good call. And this is the last one. I did obviously my reality TV stint on Dancing with the Stars. If you had to do a reality TV show, what one would you do?
Ooh, well, it couldn't be The Bachelor, since my wife would resent that.
That's what I said.
I'm thinking, it would probably have to be maybe either America's Got Talent.
Okay.
Or, and I'm not a singer, so it couldn't be The Voice, but maybe, gosh, what's the big show? Not Who Wants to Be?
America's Got Talent.
America's Got Talent.
I'm just trying to think. That's probably the range in which I've watched. And then there's obviously the cooking ones, and I don't.
Oh, the cooking ones, sure. I'd go on with Gordon Ramsay, and I'd do that. Yeah, I'd love that.
Well, see, that's where I think it's a safe zone. It's like you can cook. All right, the last thing we do every time is we ask everyone to pronounce a few words. And so, do you say data or data?
Data.
Gala or gala?
Gala.
Iran or Iran?
Iran.
Caramel or caramel?
Depends on where I am at the time, but usually it would be caramel.
All right. And this is my last favorite for everyone in the South. Aunt or aunt?
Oh, aunt. Absolutely.
There you go. Of course. Governor Mike Huckabee, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you. You did not disappoint as I would have expected. You have such a great trajectory in life, and it's fun to be able to share that with others because it's great what you've done, how you've done it, who you've done it with. And so thank you for your time today.
It is always a pleasure. The Huckabee family are big fans of Sean Spicer. Always know we'll always be in your corner.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me.
Take care, my friend. God bless you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. As I said at the outset, I learned a lot about Mike Huckabee that I didn't know at the beginning. And he's such an enjoyable person to speak with, isn't he? It's a fun conversation to have with somebody. He's an enjoyable person to have a conversation with, to learn from, and you see why Sarah's going to do very well as governor. She had a great mentor as a father, and so I think she's going to be hugely successful. She had a great sort of North Star to look at. But as I said at the outset as well, he has been somebody that I actually, when he first ran for president, I supported. And it's not just something you can say. I actually wrote the check. It's on the FEC reports. I liked how he approached it. I didn't agree with him on every issue. There are a couple of areas back in the day that I wasn't, but I loved how he approached himself. I loved how I felt like he was authentic in a way that I hadn't seen before. And I thought there were too many people that would say and do what you wanted. Mike Huckabee was the real deal. And he brought it up in the interview that, He was in public service for the right reasons. He believed in things for the right reasons. You knew where he stood for the right reason. And so if you didn't believe in every position that he believed in, at least you knew that he wasn't going to sell out. And I'd been doing this for a long time. I mean, I've been running races for decades. But I liked how I just felt like this is a guy I can trust. I didn't think that he was going to go to Washington and get entrapped by the swamp, and he's still the same guy today. And so I really enjoyed having this conversation with him, and I hope you enjoyed listening to it. Got another great conversation headed your way next week. But of course, Monday, as we get closer and closer to this election within 30 days, so much happened this week. Obviously, big news coming out of Georgia with Herschel Walker, the polls closing in Pennsylvania with Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, that's tightening up. Adam Laxalt looks to be opening up a little bit of a lead in Nevada, or at least that's where Republicans are going to be putting a lot more money. I mean, this is going to come down to the wire in the Senate. So we're going to have a lot to talk about on Monday. And I think the interesting thing is we're seeing, I do want to hopefully get into this idea of what the media is doing. They are literally, it's funny, all the quote investigations, Dr. Oz did this, Herschel Walker did that. They're all interestingly one-sided. And have you noticed how every candidate is MAGA crazy, right-wing nut job on the right, and then just Democrat so-and-so on the left? Isn't that funny how the press reports that? Hopefully you get a time to get into that. Anyway, have a great weekend. Thanks for subscribing. Share, subscribe, review. Appreciate it. I'll see you back here Monday.